Everyone, clerk has advised me we have a quorum, so I'll call the sixth meeting of the Public Works meeting to order. And members of the public are advised that our meetings are webcast live by the City of Hamilton and temporarily archived on the city website. Other individuals and the media may also be audibly or visibly recording this meeting. All electronic devices are to be switched to the non-audible function during committee meetings. And I'd like to start by introducing a few new Public Works managers who are joining us today. In engineering services, there's David Lamont. Where are you, David? Welcome. We have Erica Waite. Welcome, Erica. Sam Scarlett from Forestry. Hi, Sam. Joel McCormick, manager of waste collections. Boy, you guys all look young. And Catherine McCausland, manager recycling and waste disposal. And transportations, operations, and maintenance, we have Kim Weisko, manager business initiatives. Hi, Kim. And we have a bit of a sad note today also, in that after 35 years, Martin White is retiring. And this, well, Martin, you may want to come up and say a few words after a standing ovation. Why don't you come up and give us some thoughts about quick thoughts about your career. And looks like from the video you like the water, so you're going to be spending some time in the water. We're going to miss you, though, solving all our traffic problems.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the members of the committee. It's been a great ride. I've almost 39 years with the city, all with the traffic department, and I can say that I've been pleased and very proud to represent the citizens of Hamilton and the council of the city of Hamilton over the years. Mayor Powell was the mayor when I started here, and I may be been here longer than some councilors have been alive probably now, but I just want to say that it's been a really great ride and that I've really enjoyed it, and I hope that the new programs that traffic has brought out in the last 5 to 10 years have been successful in each ward in the city, and that we've reduced the risk to our citizens on the roadway. So I do appreciate your applause, and I just want to say that it's been great. Thank you.
Martin, thank you for your service. Edward, has you got anything further you'd like to add? Any jokes about Martin you can tell us? Or?
No, I think just on behalf of staff, I'd like to congratulate Martin on his retirement. It's been 39 years, and as he's indicated, he's seen a lot of change over time, and I'm sure he'll transition nicely into retirement. He has the biggest smile behind me, I'm sure, right now. 2 days from now, he'll be fishing somewhere and enjoying himself. So again, all the best to in his retirement.
Well, thank you very much. And I was hoping you could tell a story about putting a sign upside down, or something that's humorous that way, Martin. But good luck in your retirement. I'm jealous. So there are no ceremonial activities today. And Madam Clerk, are there any changes to the agenda?
Yes, Mr. Chair, there are changes to the agenda. We have 4 added delegation requests for today's meeting, all pertaining to the process for the closure and sale of alleyways. Item 6.3, Brenda Duke from Beautiful Alleys. Item 6.4, Carl Andrus. Item 6.5, Beatrice Ikoko from Environment Hamilton. Item 6.6, Cameron Kretsch. Please note that Cameron Kretsch and Brenda Duke withdrew as registered speakers for items 8.2 and 8.3 in favor of being added to the agenda as delegation requests. This is due to the fact that they don't wish to comment on the proposed application specifically, but instead wish to speak to the issue of the closure and sale of alleyways in general terms. We also have revised motion 11.1, B city designation for the city of Hamilton, which is before you. Item 14.1 has been revised to include item F as a reason for going into closed session. And item 14.2 has been revised as well, and it is also before you. There's also a number of added presentations that I've received that are before you.
Okay, thank you. Can I please have a mover and a seconder then to approve the agenda as amended? Moved by Paul, seconded by Nan. All in favor? Esther, you got to? That carries 9-0. Any declarations of interest today? Seeing none, approval of the minutes of the previous meeting. May I have a mover and a seconder to approve the minutes of April the 1st? Moved by Jackson, second by Pauls. All in favor, electronic vote. That carries. So we'll move on. There are no communication items, and there is a delegation request from Nick Clip, Manager, Hamilton Operations, Enbridge Gas, respecting 2021 Kirkwall Hamilton Pipeline Project proposed. This is for the June 17th Public Works meeting. Moved by Marula, seconded by Arlene Vanderbeek. All in favor, electronic vote. That carries. Item 6.2 is Catherine Mulcaster, respecting banning plastic shopping bags in Hamilton. This is also for a future meeting. Mover and seconder, moving by the Vice Chair, seconded by Pauls. All in favor? That carries. 6.3 is Brenda Duke, Beautiful Alleyways, respecting the process for closure and sale of alleyways and community engagement for today's meeting. Moved by Councillor Danko, seconded by Councillor Pearson. Electronic vote. That carries. Item 6.4 is Carl Andrus, respecting the proposed process for the closure and sale of alleyways for today's meeting. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Moved by Farr, seconded by Danko. All in favor, electronic vote. That carries. Item 6.5 is Beatrice Ikoko, Environment Hamilton, respecting the process for the closure and sale of alleyways and the potential alleyways as public spaces and valuable green spaces infrastructure. Mover and a seconder to approve it for today's meeting. Moved by Danko, seconded by Collins. All in favor? That carries. And finally, item 6.6, Cameron Crosstack, respecting the process for the closure and sale of alleyways and strategies for retention. And it's also for today's meeting. Can I have a mover and a seconder to approve the delegation request? Moved by Nan, seconded by Marula. All in favor? That's carried. Item 7.1 is a hard surface traffic audit conversion to floral features. Are there any questions respecting item 7.1? Seeing none, then I just need a mover and a seconder to receive it. Moved by Pearson, seconded by Jackson. It's just a show of hands. All in favor? Item 7.2 is the inclusion of the Claremont Access and HSR route rationalization study. It visions the HSR update on the outstanding business. Are there any questions respecting 7.2? Seeing nothing, a motion to receive. Moved by Danko, seconded by Nan. All in favor? Item 7.3 is the Waste Management Advisory Committee minutes of September 26, 2018. Are there any questions of 7.3? If not, a mover and a seconder. Moved by Danko, seconded by Vanderbeek. All in favor? That's just to receive. Item 7.4 is the Waste Management Advisory Committee minutes, February the 7th. Any questions? Seeing none, moved by Pearson, seconded by Vanderbeek. All in favor? That's carried. Let's move on now to public delegations and hearings. So item 8.1 is Ann Pearson and Gail United Nations Association of Canada, Hamilton Branch, Culture of Peace, Hamilton respecting April 25th Peace Luncheon with a focus on the reduction of plastics use. And this was approved at the March 18th meeting. So I'd like to call on Gail Rappold, I hope that's correct. If not, correct it when you get up here, please. United Nations Association Canada, Hamilton Branch, and Culture of Peace. And once again, to focus on plastic. So welcome. You have 5 minutes for your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Councillor Ferguson. Bernice McCrae is with me. Ann Pearson's at a conference in Toronto, unfortunately, this morning. Thank you. Thank you for taking the time to hear the results of our peace luncheon last week. I'm going to talk briefly about who was there, what we talked about, why it's important, why it may seem overwhelming, and why it has to be dealt with at the city level, the community level, in spite of the fact that it is a huge world problem. So let me begin by just saying there were 50 there and representing various groups, but I think it's important to realize the kinds of groups that are now focused on the broad notion of peace and a culture of peace. It was interesting to listen to someone say, you know, it's interesting that the United Nations and Culture of Peace are having something about the environment. And for those of you who've been around for a longer time, you'll know that since 2000, the United Nations has been in this council chamber talking about the 6 principles of a culture of peace. And care for the environment is one of the most critical of the 6, because there will be no peace if there's no environmental justice. So a number of groups were represented: Council for Canadians, the Ecolog churches, several other faith groups, Environment Hamilton, Culture of Peace, United Nations, Gandhi Peace Festival, Hamilton Interfaith. And I'm not speaking on behalf of them in the fact that there was a formal motion, but I am giving you the essence of what came out of that luncheon and the speaker. We were very fortunate to have Linda Lukasik, who many of you I'm sure know, as our speaker, and her theme was the importance of reducing plastics in the world. And I just want to quote about 4 stats she gave that were pretty staggering, and this is why, although these are at the world level, I'll eventually get to why it's important here and perhaps only at the community level that something can be done. 1 million plastic bottles per minute used in the world. 4 billion plastic bags annually. And 50 billion plastic cups per year. A minimal number of those are recycled, and it's estimated by scientists that by 2050 there'll be more plastic in the ocean than fish if we don't change things radically. There's a paper in front of you, and it begins by asking you the question, what are you prepared to do around this table to reduce the use and abuse of plastic in this community by the end of 2021? In 2009, Dr. David Adams from New York spoke to this actual group, talking about how critical it was that cities and communities took charge of developing the kind of community they wanted, because it was his belief in a couple of books he wrote that at the national and provincial or state level, it wouldn't happen. They were too invested in the industrial military complex to actually be able, even if they wished, to break that down and focus on developing a culture of peace, justice, fairness. I think it's fair to say, without naming specifics, that we're actually seeing what he's talking about come true at the national, international, and even provincial level, where divisiveness makes good decisions virtually impossible. In this council chamber and prior, this council in the city of Hamilton has consistently demonstrated that they are prepared to take action before other groups. And that goes back as many as 40 or 45 years when this council, Hamilton City Council then, declared themselves a nuclear-free zone when almost no cities in Canada had done so. You've continued to do things, as have other cities in the province, like ban pesticides and insecticides locally, and eventually the province made the decision to do so, but not until a number of communities actually acted. I also sat outside and watched as you dealt with the trans protocol and took steps as, again, one of the first cities in Canada to step up and take an action that potentially was controversial, but then in your hearts you felt addressed the human worth and dignity of all people. And so today, I'm asking you to think about the impact of plastics on this city, on the people, on its health. And I'm asking you and your staff to think about what steps can be taken immediately and over the next 2 or 3 years to attend to this.
You just reached your 5 minutes, so I'll give you a minute to wrap up if you can.
All right. No, that's fine. On the paper in front of you, then, you will see a quote from Dr. Adams. You'll see a summary of what I've said. And on the back, you'll see a list of 10 things that we committed to at that peace luncheon, the 50 of us, to doing ourselves and in our organizations that at our personal and group level can work toward the reduction of plastic use. And our question to you is, what are you prepared to do at a city level to support us and extend our work? Thanks, Councillor Ferguson.
Okay, so we have some questions for you. So we have first Councillor Danko.
Yes?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, I'm just wondering if over the years you've noticed a change in the public perspective towards plastic pollution. Has there been more awareness recently? Are people more...
I would say in one way, yes, the plastic bags. One of the things that came up over and over again last Thursday was, we can only do so much as individuals, but unless governments, city, provincial, are prepared to legislate things for business and industry, it's the production that's the problem. So yes, we've done something about plastic bags in grocery stores, but unfortunately, and not blaming anyone here, but unfortunately, we've gone a bit backwards with our plastic recycling in this city as a result of some things that, I understand that have been explained to us. I guess the short answer is a little bit, but not nearly enough.
Okay, thank you for the presentation. It's very helpful.
Councillor Nan.
Good morning, through the chair. Thank you so much for the delegation over here. I just wanted to see if in the luncheon, one of the pieces that you've stated that, I'm definitely sitting with, which is the conversation about how do we prepare as a city to reconcile this issue of the amount of plastic. I, among many residents, was part of cleanups this weekend.
Yes.
Where majority of what I picked up was plastic utensils, plastic bags, plastic straws, and things that seem to have been around on the ground for a long time and hanging out near our sewer grates and our water grates, just kind of like literally hanging out there as plastics for a while. So I was just curious, in the luncheon, if there was any conversation about, you mentioned the need to prepare from an immediate perspective, a short-term perspective, or a long-term perspective, and you understand the complexity of legislating businesses and industry where the city has no role in governing how production happens of these plastic goods. But I was just curious if you could give some insight on if there was thought given to what immediate action could look like, what short-term action could look like, and what long-term action could look like.
I probably am not the best person to respond to that, but I certainly would be willing to take that back to some of the more environmentally focused groups and produce some answers for you, Councillor. I think one of the things that did come up, though, was that cities in Europe have taken direct action, even though the state hasn't, perhaps. And things like inside individual cities actually banning the use of plastic bags, and I see that's already on an agenda, or forcing, well, forcing is probably the wrong word, legislating. I was in Germany 25 years ago, and when you walked out the grocery store, you took all the wrappings and plastic and stuff off and left it for them. You didn't take it home, and that was in 1998. So I think there are some short-term things that communities and cities could mandate, but I understand what you're saying. At the larger scale, it does require provincial or federal legislation.
Yeah, and it's hopeful with the provincial government weighing out the potential of banning single-use plastics as a way of diverting it from landfills and
Right.
the ongoing cost associated to more and more items going into our land in landfills that really ought not be there in the first place. The other component I think that I hear in this is what is within the realm of the city. So
Yes.
the city is also a building. It's a corporation. We've got a lot of public facility.
Yes.
We have leases, right? And we have vendors. So there are things that the city could be looking at, and I'm looking forward to continuing this dialogue with yourself, other members of the community, and around this council table to look at this issue.
I appreciate that very much, Councillor. Thank you.
Councillor Pauls.
Yes. My 4 boys at Hill Park, you were the principal. And I am so impressed that you have taken this on, because I think through education, we learn so much. And what better person than you taking this initiative? So I want to thank you for coming here and for doing such a great presentation. I was actually at some schools. They're taking the initiative of school being green and all the invention they want to come up with. It's so wonderful. So I just want to say thank you. Thank you for coming here, and thank you for what a great job you did as a principal of Hill Park, and you continue to be involved, which is amazing. So I wanted to say thank you.
Thank you very much.
And I have no other speakers, so I'll take a motion to receive the presentation. Moved by Nan, seconded by Vanderbeek. All in favor? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
We'll move on now to item 8.2, which is proposed permanent closure and sale of a portion of public unassumed alley abutting 255 to 261 Wellington Street North, Hamilton. And as required under the city's bylaw number 14204, a public meeting is required. Notice of the public meeting was provided and posted on the City of Hamilton's website. The notice advised that anyone whose lands are prejudicially affected may appear before the committee this morning. The clerk has advised that there are 2 individuals registered to speak to this matter. So at this time, I'd like to call on the first registered speaker, Amber Lindsay from Urban Solutions Planning and Land Development Consultants, Inc. Good morning, Amber, and you have 5 minutes for your presentation.
Morning, thank you. So good morning, Mr. Chair, members of committee. My name is Amber Lindsay. I'm a planner with Urban Solutions. I'm joined today by Mr. Sergio Manchia. We are the authorized planning consultants of for the owners of 255 to 261 Wellington Street North, which is the subject of today's application. So the application today proposes the closure of a portion of the north-south alley that's abutting the west side of the properties I've mentioned, just south of Barton Street East. As you can see from the image to the left, the alleyway is currently primarily used as a maneuvering area for the residents along Wellington Street North on the west side. The request before you today is intended to facilitate the land assembly for the development proposal that's associated with formal consultation number FC 18094 for a 7-story mixed-use building. As you can see from the image above, the lands that are highlighted in yellow, which abut the subject alleyway, are intended to be consolidated with the lands shown in blue, which are described as 222 to 228 Barton Street East and 265 Wellington Street North. This proposal is for a 7-story mixed-use building with ground floor commercial office uses and residential above. I've shown a rough conceptual rendering that was presented through the formal consultation process. It's subject to change, of course, as we go through the planning application process. And this was presented to the development review team in October of last year. The required official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment applications and the supporting studies are currently being compiled. To provide a bit more background on the subject lands, there was a previous approval for the portion of the alley abutting 222 Barton Street East, 263 and 265 Wellington Street North, and these are the lands to be consolidated with 255 to 261 Wellington Street North. Since the approval, the owner acquired 255 to 257 Wellington Street, which necessitated the extension that's before you today. So the request that's before you today is for the land shown in red, and the existing approval is the land shown in blue. We understand that through the public circulation of the application today, there were 2 objections to the proposal, and both regarding parking access. As I mentioned, the alleyway is primarily used for maneuvering area for those for those properties that are fronting on to the west side of Wellington Street North. In response to these objections, our application was modified to include a 4-meter hammerhead that's shown in green. So that's to remain as part of the public unassumed alleyway. And that's to ensure that those neighboring properties have continued access and unencumbered access to their private parking areas. So today I'm asking committee that they approve the requested closure for the following reasons. The closure will eliminate maintenance and liability associated with city ownership while facilitating the proposed development at this prominent intersection of the city. The application is in alignment with the existing council approval for the alleyway closure of the lands that are abutting the subject lands. And as I mentioned, a hammerhead will be provided to ensure that neighbors have continued and unencumbered access to their private parking areas. And finally, committee's approval today will not have any adverse impacts on the function or usability of the balance of the alleyway. So I thank committee for the time speaking to this item today. I'd also like to thank staff for their time and support on this application, and I'd be happy to take any questions of the committee.
Okay, Amber, we do have some questions for you. So the first is Councillor Farr.
You didn't thank the councillor, Amber.
Thank you, Councillor.
2-3 years in the making. Good to see you. I didn't know you were going to come and present. This is relatively minor with about 2.5 properties. The previous closure, as you noted, I think on slide 6 or 7, was a larger one, all for, I think, what's going to be a great development and certainly addressing other issues as it relates to this particular laneway. So the red is in question. My only question to you, Amber, is your proposed car maneuvering area through you. In a previous motion, I think the last motion as it relates to this issue, council's already approved that hammerhead. There it looks more like a square than a hammerhead, so that's not necessarily on your slide there, the true dimensions. There's more than enough opportunity to do the 3-point turn and head out for the residents. That was, as you noted, the 2 people who commented that live on the west side. That was their primary concern.
Through the chair, that's correct. So the 4-meter envelope will encompass enough area for the hammerhead to occur.
Thank you.
And we have Councillor Vanderbeek.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I already figured it out, but so the proponent owns all 4 of those properties along Wellington North, where the blue previously purchased alley is, and the red that you're requesting. Is that correct?
Through the chair, yes.
Okay. Who's on the other side of the alley?
That's also the proponent today.
Okay, thank you. That's what I wanted to know. Thanks.
Okay, I have no further speakers, so thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
And I'd like to now call on Bill King. Is Bill in the audience? He's ready. Mr. Whitehead. Go ahead. For Amber or for,
That's okay, I'll ask staff.
okay.
Thank you, Alderman Ferguson. I wanted to make a few comments about this application and the factors I think that the city kind of overlooks in the material that was provided to you. I'm here, I guess, as a kind of an amateur historian, and my interest is the city of Hamilton. This summer we did a number of walking tours every weekend, and one of the themes was downtown alleys. And I think there are a couple of factors that I noticed in relation to this application and relating to the general issue, which I would like to remind council of. I don't want to denigrate the importance of developments like this one to downtown Hamilton and giving the developers what they need to complete them in a marketable fashion. But I think in the materials I get a sense that there's a public benefit from these alleys that's that's possibly being overlooked. I notice in the materials, one of the rationales given is that it aligns with previous alleyway closures. I want to, when I've studied the development of Hamilton's neighborhoods, all of these neighborhood structures with their alleys, especially in the north and east ends, were put into operation as part of a plan of subdivision, which also considered the benefit of the community for access to places and from places, avoiding major intersections, but also for recreational uses, which I think is very important. And also, as someone who actually rides my bike around Hamilton, they're very useful for bikers and walkers. So there's a public benefit to alleys, especially if they go from one place to another. And I'm afraid if you just consider this in terms of case by case, closing one alley, therefore we'll close the next section. What we may end up with downtown is a big complex of blind alleys, which are actually more useless than alleys that go places. So I wanted to point that out. Also, function or usability of an alley. Again, this seems to be in the materials, just defined from the perspective of the people living in the development and the neighboring landowners on the alley. I think there's a larger community interest. And also the development of the intersection. There's very few more important things in our cities than getting cars around efficiently and by the shortest distance possible. But alleys are also very useful in helping people avoid these kind of intersections. And they provide an alternative way of human traffic and perhaps of bicycle traffic. And there are quite a few people in that part of town that don't use cars, don't own cars. So I wanted to point those things out. I know that you have Ms. Duke before you, who's going to speak about some of the broader importance of developing a plan for alleys instead of proceeding willy-nilly. I just want to re-stress that I felt that the report, what I saw of it, I only learned about this recently, although I've been interested in the question for some time, tended to focus only on private interests and private benefits, and I thought doesn't give a wide enough consideration to the possible public benefit. I know Ms. Duke is going to elaborate on that. So that's really all I have to say, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you.
Thank you for your presentation. So I need a motion to receive both those delegations, moved by Pearson, seconded by Farr. All in favor? That's carried. So I'm now going to call for general speakers. So is there any members of the public who wish to come forward to speak to this matter? And for the second time, are there any members of the public who wish to come forward to speak to this matter? And for a third and final time, are there any members of the public who wish to come forward to speak to this matter? Seeing none, may I please have a mover and a seconder to close the public meeting? Moved by Councillor Paul, seconded by Councillor Whitehead. All in favor? Carried. The public meeting is now closed. So on the report, are there any questions or discussion from the committee respecting the report? Councillor Farr.
Just want to quickly thank the residents who, we began engaging on this, I think, back in 2016. What isn't mentioned in the report, and we just heard from a delegate talking about I think some of the things we're going to hear from Brenda and others who are going to come up and speak soon, so I won't dwell on that in terms of a greater capacity for laneways, and certainly there's a lot in Ward 2, but across our city. I'm sure we have our challenges, my first foray into Public Works Committee, but with a $20 million annualized and growing roads deficit, it's been tough in past Public Works Committees to focus on throwing a whole lot of change at laneways. In this particular case, what I heard from many of the adjacent residents, illegal dumping, big issue. Our office had to react to it many, many times over the years. Criminal activity, break-ins, that sort of thing, and drug use. So when we initially began conversing with those immediately impacted on this particular closure at the north end, those were the sorts of things that were reiterated and that our office had been dealing with in the past. And I think when you take a look at this report and see that there were two residents who commented, of course, all are circulated that are adjacent and immediately impacted by these and other closures or proposed closures. The primary focus for both wasn't so much the public use, but the issue of getting their car out once they get in. So it was more about moving in and out and access, and that's where that obviously was solved with the hammerhead in the previous motion of council. But, you know, the engagement does happen. We may, I mean, certainly we have in the past engaged in greater capacities. I'll probably reference that a little bit later. But in this particular case, we have a laneway here that will see at the north side, in short order, a much greater and higher use in terms of the property with the medical offices, with more residential, and especially the opportunity in many different facets to clean this area up, which I think I heard loud and clear from adjacent residents is the greatest of the desires. Thank you.
Councilor Whitehead.
My question is to staff. So I go back to the Kiko case, 1 foot land was assessed. You know, I think we're over $100,000+. We now have another case with the Mazda case on West 5th. Yet again, another 1 foot reserve. Our staff go and assess the 1 foot, $185,000. It's just crazy stuff, but that's what staff come up with, and that's what we're asking a pensioner to pay. So I'm asking, what are we valuing? This is our land, that's correct, right? These alleys we own? 'Cause my wife did the pins, and I'm pretty sure that they're owned by the city of Hamilton.
Who would like to take?
Yeah, through the chair, Councilor. The alley closure process runs through engineering services, that's me. If you're asking about the valuation of the lands, we defer to.
Yeah,
we
and
defer
the
to
reason I'm
real
asking
estate.
that is because I was told it was something new to me, and I met with Ray, is he indicated that it's not just the value of the land, it's the economic, what's the word, terminology, benefit that can arrive from the land that is built into the assessment. So clearly this is a private development. There's a private optimized benefit as a result of the ownership of the alleyway. How are we assessing the value of the land that is, first of all, is it larger than a foot, the alleyway?
Through the chair, yeah, this alley is, I'm assuming it's 10 feet wide by I think 3.5 residential lots, whatever that turns into. Yes, it's larger than a foot.
So what are we recovering financially for the, so I don't have a problem with the plan. I just want to ensure that we have a consistent approach to land values and when they're bought and purchased, that the city's recouping those dollars.
Through the chair, Councilor, previously here at this committee, we would make a recommendation for fair market value or for nominal fee. At this point in time, we've simply deferred to real estate for the valuation during the negotiation with the landowner. So what we're doing here at this committee is the exercise to go through the Municipal Act requirements of, does the municipality or the road authority have any interest in this land, a debate at council, and then a move forward through the real estate process. That's where the valuation would take place.
So I appreciate that. So from the process of moving this forward and allowing the developer to have the close off the land is not an issue for me. I mean, I think I've heard from the ward councillor, there's been good consultation. They've offered a very reasonable hammerhead to help the affected neighbors to turn their vehicles around. So I think and you're getting a development out. So I think there's a lot of positive. But I don't think that I've ever delved enough into and experiencing how we seem to take private homeowners and pensioners and ransom them on values of 1 foot of whatever you call it, foot of land, yet on a 10-foot alleyway, which goes the length of the property, we give it at a bargain price, and I'm not sure how we're assessing these values.
Can you help us out with the approximate value? What have we?
Through the chair, I cannot. We would defer this to real estate. That was one of the challenges we had in the past, was trying to embed a value in this process. So what we're asking this committee is for the approval to divest ourselves of this land and for the purposes in the report, and then the real estate will bring back an offer for sale. I'm assuming through their site.
So it will come back from, because I haven't experienced this where real estate comes back with the value.
Oh, ever.
So we'll have to reach out to real estate and get them to confirm on that. But at this point in time, no, we're not bringing a valuation forward.
So I have no problem supporting the report before us. I like to see what that value is, what formula we're approaching, because it's pretty difficult for me to stand in front of, like I said, pensioners that are getting assessed land values in one formula, and yet on our alleys, which is much broader, we're assessing in a different value. I want to make sure there's a consistent approach in how we do this across the board. So I'm asking if I don't know if I need a motion to do that, to have that formula and that real estate deal brought back to the appropriate committee.
Maybe appropriate, Councillor, if staff could bring back just a summary of the last, because we seem to do a lot of these alleyways, the last number of alleyways and what the value was in an in-camera report back to committee.
Thank you.
Okay, I have no, oh, I do. Councillor Farr for second time.
Just to Councillor Whitehead, and welcome back, Councillor. Just to his point, I can confirm, having dealt with this issue numerous times, we no longer look at the nominal value formula. It was a thing of the past. It is a thing of the past now. Real estate does have a protocol. They try to avoid any kind of bonusing scenario. Generally, it's a market value process, and I don't think it would be much for a one-pager at the next committee for Ray Kessler and his group upstairs from real estate to offer. As
Good question, just to get a summary of the last 10 or so, you know.
And the only real one I can remember that went away for a buck was the Sirloin Cellar alley, just off James and King. Right. And you'll recall there were extenuating circumstances.
Well, part of it was under the alleyway. Okay, so I see no more speakers. So I move over to second to approve the recommendation of the report. Moved by Farr, seconded by Dan. Electronic vote, please. That carries 11 to nothing. So 8.3 now is the proposed permanent closure and sale of a portion of a public unassumed alley between abutting 21 Coburn Street, Hamilton. This is also again in Ward 2. I see why Councillor Farr has come on this committee. As required in the city bylaw number 14204, a public meeting is required. Notice of this public meeting was provided and was posted on the City of Hamilton's website. The notice advised that anyone whose lands are prejudicially affected may appear before the committee this morning. The clerk has advised that there are no registered speakers to speak in this matter. So I'm going to go to the public and see if anyone's interested. I'd like to call upon the public who wish to come forward to speak to this matter. You can come forward at this time. Welcome. Just please give your name, please.
My name is Diane Twombly. I'm the owner of 21 Colburn Street.
Okay.
Thank you very much for letting me speak today. I didn't intend to originally, but I thought I should. I just wanted to make a few things clear about the application, seeing as the gentleman had talked about the value of alleyways and people in the city being able to go through them and move through them.
Hold the microphone up nice and close to your soft-spoken.
How's that?
That's better.
Better? First of all, I just wanted to say that it's a blind alley. It doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't serve a purpose. It's a strange little chunk of land next to our house that we have to go into because it's our only access from the back of our house to the street. So if we want to take our garbage out or recycling or yard waste or go cycling, we have to go through the alley. In the 11 years that we've lived there, we've removed mattresses, broken glass, underpants, fishnets, car parts. You wouldn't believe what we found out there. We haul it to the dump, and this has been going on forever. We're the only people who go out there. We weed it. We clean up the dog excrement. There are a lot of times we can't use it because there are people out there, men, that I'm not willing to go out and confront. So it's a safety issue. We've had our bicycles stolen. Our neighbors have had their bicycles stolen. It's an ongoing cleanup effort. We want the neighborhood to be beautiful too, and we want it to be a nice part of the community. And I just wondered if I could circulate a few photos, sort of.
Just hand them to the clerk and she'll distribute them.
They're before and after pictures. You can tell the befores for the afters.
You're in support of the closure, are you?
Yes, I just wanted to say that we really want to just fence the end off so that no one can come in there and dump things. It's a cover for crime. 2 years ago, there was a homeless person living there all summer, which we didn't have the heart to kick them out. It was a girl. But it creates a safety issue, and it just becomes very uncomfortable for us. We just want to put a gate over, and I know that the area behind there is also an access way for parking for our neighbor, so we want to ensure that he can also move freely, park across the part of the land where his tenants drive. We don't want to create any barriers to anyone in the neighborhood. We just really want it gone, to be honest. And if we could put a gate up, knock our fence down and put some grass on it and just have it private, that's really what we're hoping for.
Thank you. So we have one question for you, Councillor Farr.
Just want to thank Diane. She's engaged her neighbors very well. I think you just referenced you're permitting that in this perpetual deed access for the one other adjacent.
Yes, yeah, for Don's property, the rental place on the corner.
And appreciate those efforts on your part. I mean, you've been at this too, I think, for 2-3 years now.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming in and speaking to us.
Thank you.
Thank you. And for a second time, is there anyone in the audience wishing to come forward and speak to us about 21 Colburn Street? And for a third and final time, is there anyone else who wish to speak to us on this closure of 21 Colburn Street alleyway? Okay, I need a mover and a seconder to close the public meeting. Moved by Councillor Farr, seconded by Councillor Pauls. All in favor? That's carried. The public meeting is now closed. So are there any questions or discussions from the committee respecting the report? Seeing none, a mover and a seconder then to approve the recommendation. Moved by Farr, seconded by Pauls. We need electronic vote on this. And that carries 11-0. Okay, so we'll move on then. Item 8.4 is Brenda Duke, Beautiful Alleyways, respecting the process for the closure and sale of alleyways and community engagement. So I'd like to now call on Brenda, Beautiful Alleyways, to come forward with her delegation.
Oh yeah, I'm short. Good morning.
I'll pull it right down to you, okay? Well, good morning. So you have 5 minutes to do your presentation.
Good morning. Thank you for hearing our delegation. I'm Brenda Duke, and I have Tina Dort from Beautiful Alleys with me as well. And a lot of you are familiar with me and with our efforts in the city and in the alleys. And you're my clicker. You're like my husband. What we do as Beautiful Alleys, for those that don't know, is we create safe, clean, accessible public spaces for people of all ages and abilities. And our mandate is to build capacity in like-minded residents to take stewardship of their alleys and laneways. And we do that through safety training, education, and support. We're not just cleanup people, but people have been cleaning alleys for decades. And what Beautiful Alleys did is bring those people together, and in 2015 when we rebranded, and we've engaged residents all across the city. In 2 years, you can see our totals. Volunteers engaged about 1,000, orange bags of garbage collected, recycling diverted from our landfill, and brown bags of yard waste collected and disposed of. In 2017, we partnered with Canadian National Railway, and during 2 cleanups with CN staff, we gathered almost 12 tons of debris along the track, and that was, I believe, from Mary Street to John Street in the 2 cleanups. A partnership with Friendly Streets and Hamilton Health Sciences has resulted in a pilot project to create alternative pathways to the hospital zone. And that saw about 15 people coming out to help that have never normally been involved in our cleanups. Canadian Pacific Railway reached out to us, and they want to partner with Beautiful Alleys as well, and we've planned to clean up for June of 2019. The first ever official alley makeover, because we're not just cleanup, we're Beautiful Alleys, was done in partnership with Green Venture, and we enhanced a stretch of property alleyway from Westinghouse to Milton with benches, plants, lighting, and artwork. The following year, we did an alley makeover from Sanford to Westinghouse, and that speaks to the Trocadero Restaurant, which is a 75-year-old historical restaurant in our neighborhood. And we called it Lois Lane, and we have artwork, we have plantings, and the kids love walking through to see Superman. So we've also got 2 alley makeovers planned for Birch to Fullerton and from Fullerton to Milton. And this will complete a network of safe access for pedestrians and cyclists that can bypass the commercial corridor. So we've done this with community that believes in the same vision as Beautiful Alleys, community that comes together to build relationships in neighborhoods. It might not look very nice when we start, but we get out there with our pickers and our bags and we clean it up. And then after we've done that, you can see like we get groups from churches, schools, neighbors, everybody. And then after we've done that, we make it beautiful. So artwork on fences, garage doors, any place where people enjoy looking at something that isn't blank. So Beautiful Alleys believes in the benefit of community engagement. Each alley is unique to the neighborhood and to the residents that live there and abut the alley. Who better to know and understand the need of their spaces than the people who live there? What we want to do is help build community. We believe that building neighborhoods builds community, and community builds the city. And we need to know and understand how things work and how we can work together. We're asking you to look at the potential that alleys offer, and some of those I've mentioned, to build our neighborhoods. And we're asking you to continue considering the community voice in your decisions.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Nand, questions?
Thank you, through the chair. So similarly, I guess, from the last presentation or the last report, looking at what makes most sense for our alleyways, right? So if there is a fantastic mixed-use residential, commercial kind of initiative that we as a city are supporting that as best we can and using our alleys in a strategic way, ensuring that we don't lose revenue where that land use is in play. I hear fundamentally, Brenda, what you're saying here is that neighbors and community who aren't necessarily putting forward economic development projects and who don't have the funds to necessarily purchase alleyways, that the city has a role to play in thinking about how to strategically look at all of our alleyways throughout the downtown core, throughout the lower city, and also on the mountain, and think about how our alleyways could contribute to some of our other strategic priorities as a city to be the best place to raise children and age successfully. And I just want clarity around, I guess, your mission and what you're fundamentally asking us to consider around this table.
So you're right, Councillor Nan. It's not that we don't want any alley closed. It's not that we want every alley to be one thing or another. but we do want the people that live there to have a voice. So if the people have decided that they want their alley closed, and there's been effective community engagement, speaking with not only neighbors, but people who may use the alley and for pedestrian walkways or bicycling. We just want to make sure that the community has a voice. And if you need to close or want to close your alley, if there's an economic benefit to it, then that is fine. But there's also an economic benefit to maintaining them as green spaces that allow pedestrians, cyclists, children to ride their bikes instead of on the street. So yes, just whatever is best for the community and the city, and however they can work together is ideally what we're asking for.
Great, thank you. Thank you all for your work over the years in the alleyways as well.
Thank you.
Councilor Muller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
No, my mic's on.
I'm going to come to you in just, I don't know why, I'm up.
Well, Councilor Marula is up next.
Yeah, I was. Oh, was I? It's okay, if I could just quickly, I'll just quickly ask a question. Through you, Mr. Chairman. On this particular issue, a number of years ago, I brought forward a motion to have an actual study done to determine through a master plan what alleyways could be an extension of our bike lanes, pedestrian walkways, and those that perhaps would be deemed surplus would go through a process of selling them off. If we could just perhaps through you to the appropriate staff who would ever like to answer this, just what the status of that report is and the master plan being completed?
Okay, this is not a question to the delegate then.
No, it's to staff on this issue, but will help them based on their issues.
Okay, who in staff can answer that? Okay, Edward?
Thank you, the chair, to the councillor. The councillor is correct. The city's been working on a alleyway strategy and a master plan that looks at a number of the issues that have been raised here today. So we are working on a alleyway state of infrastructure report and asset management strategy. Really involves the development of a hierarchy to establish an objective to look at the life cycle management strategies for each of the alleyways that we have. It's going to look at the current state conditions, the requirements we have for each of those alleyways underneath the minimum maintenance standards. And it's also going to develop costing models to address both the capital renewal and operational maintenance components. So our goal is to come back to council this year with a strategy that looks at all of these items in draft form for consideration. The report also has to integrate with the city's requirements underneath Bill 6, which is the asset management planning for municipal infrastructure, which looks at these alleyways from a broader perspective in terms of strategic asset management policy. So we anticipate coming back to council sometime later this year with this strategy.
Okay, so just for public notification, rest assured, we're developing a plan. It's just a matter of implementing it, and that's forthcoming in a few months. Would it be fair to say it's going to be before summer or after summer?
Edward?
Through the chair to the councillor, I would anticipate it would be either sometime this summer or early fall.
Okay, cool. Thanks very much, and I appreciate your time.
Brenda, you need to stay at the podium until we receive your delegation. I know
Okay,
you don't-
sorry.
That's okay. So, Councillor Farr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good to see you, Brenda, and congratulations on the numbers and the success of Beautiful Alleys. Through you, Chair, I was pleased to hear you say, quote, "We don't want any alley closed," end quote, because certainly in my experience over a couple of terms here on council, each case is unique. You had mentioned, you rightly, that you performed our first alley beautification project through you, Chair. When was that?
2015, the spring of 2016.
Right. You worked a heck of a lot faster than this Ward 2 councillor with staff, but we had a big project that came probably shortly thereafter, however, invented and devised by the residents. So you're primarily focusing on greater engagement as it relates to laneways. But back in 2013, our first public budget, the $1 million public budget with Ward 2, almost a quarter of that million went towards what we called an urban trail pilot project. And we eventually, I think, finished that project, and now we're monitoring that project, I think in 2016, late 2016. So it's been a few years now, and it included $230K worth of upgrades to what was formerly known as Listerine Alley, which runs the north-south expanse from Beasley all the way to into another neighborhood, into Corktown neighborhood. It included grading, it included artwork, it solved a lot of problems on a hyper-local level, but also promoted, I think, exactly what you're trying to promote, which is greater use. Is that correct? It's more about just getting more use out of these empty spaces.
Well, the alleys that we've been focusing our beautification on with the makeovers, so behind 541 Eatery, behind the Trocadero, we'll be moving behind the Barton Street Library. And if you're familiar with Barton Street, you know it's a very busy commercial corridor. There are trucks, a lot of traffic, and we also have an enormous amount of children in our neighborhood that walk along there every day to get to schools and parks and recreation centers. And our focus was on creating a safer space for them. So the moms, instead of bringing their kids, you know, walking their baby and holding their toddler and walking along Barton Street, they can go through the alley, look at some artwork. They love the hockey picture, and, you know. So we try to focus on what our community needs and how we enhance our community by recognizing the historical value, all of that. And as I said, sometimes pedestrian or cycling pathways are called alternative pathways because they lead you off the main streets. What we like to call ours is a network of safe access. So virtually, you can walk from Birch Avenue to Sanford, where the crossing guard and the lights are, without walking along and taking a chance of a car jumping the curb or a child running out onto the street.
So it sounds like you're being selective. You're focusing on those alleyways, laneways that make the most sense in terms of if we do clean it up, the people will come, and it serves a purpose.
It's also my neighborhood, Jason.
Yeah, and that helps too. But you're doing great, well beyond your own neighborhood, Brenda, and it's much appreciated. I have one final question. So you're also part of the reason why you're doing this I see a lot of great value to it, is that there is value. From a monetary standpoint, you're doing this for next to nothing. And I had mentioned through our public budget, one laneway was $230,000. When we get Public Works involved, now we're talking, you know, legal, we're talking grading has to be done appropriately, there's costs and much to look at. So have you yourself in your work ever, you know, priced out the ultimate beautification of an alleyway, and what sort of numbers have you come up with if you have?
I haven't done it so much for an alleyway. I did have a project in mind in collaboration with Friendly Streets that was quite high. I think it would have been in around the $50,000 range for, and I call that quite high because most of the work we do is done with the minimal of city grants, the minimal of donations, and just basically we do it all on a shoestring. So I think the West Mill Alley, we had a budget of $10,000, and that came through Hamilton Future Fund. And the Lois Lane Alley was $7,000, again through them. And we have $1,000 in the bank to do the other alley that we're planning on, and a grant pending. And, you know, just in case anybody wants to speak to that when it comes up. So we haven't had buckets of money to work with. But I think that what we've accomplished on that shoestring is vital. And what it's done, more than having somebody give us a blank check, it's built community. And they've gone out and found out, how do we make this happen? And how do we make $100 stretch into $2?
Okay, thank you. Brenda, thank you for the great work you and your volunteers all do in keeping Hamilton beautiful. So a motion to receive then, moved by Farr, seconded by Nan. All in favor? That's carried. Now you're good to go. Thanks.
I'm good to go, thank you.
Now I'd like to call upon Carl Artis to delegate respecting the process for the closure and sale of alleyways. Is Carl here?
And dressed, by the way. I mean, this is only like my millionth time up here. So, anyway, hello and thank you to members of this committee. I'm here to talk today about alleyways, not just the two on the agenda, but alleyways as a whole. Currently, this council asks city staff to review and update the alleyway best management practices, an ongoing and not yet finished alleyway management strategy update from March 20th, 2017 is not yet complete. That was item PW17008, if you want to look it up. This strategy was going to take into consideration the use of alleys beyond simple burdensome properties to be maintained. That work is not yet finished. I cannot imagine this committee even considering the sale of alleys before the city staff themselves have finished this strategy. On one hand, the city is considering and improving laneways for housing, access during LRT, they're used as cycle pathways, and will be critical in the lower city as the LRT construction moves forward. Jason Farr, as he mentioned earlier, in the Downtown and International Village BIAs, have transformed some of the alleyways just around the corner from this building into more accessible spaces. The art and lighting of those alleyways has changed the feel of them. I use them frequently when I'm walking through downtown. They are no longer burdensome eyesores, but downtown community assets. Other speakers can talk about the transformative potential of those public spaces. So I want to talk about something equally important, our property tax dollars. Currently, as this council faces increasing pressure to keep property taxes low, property in Hamilton is a hot commodity. In fact, the alleyway policy states alleys and walkways adjacent to residential areas are conveyed for a nominal fee, bracket $2. That's on the city application if I were to put in an application to buy the laneway behind my building. That's what it states. Those adjacent to commercial values are conveyed at a fair market value. I think that as city staff develops a policy for alleyways and looks to view them more as city assets, again, not those burdensome properties, that members of this committee want to stop the wholesale giveaway of this land asset, or at best consider pricing policies on them to look at not just the fair market value of the land, but their increasing use as community spaces. At the end of the day, alleyways belong to all the residents of Hamilton and are worth far more, so please, I would urge you that once these assets are sold, they cannot be re-inquired. So I would hope that this committee would be very diligent on the matters of closing alleyways and also to reconsider their current policy of wholesale land giveaway. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, I see nobody has any questions, so motion to receive. Moved by Pearson, seconded by Vanderbeek. All in favor? Okay, thanks, Carl. We'll now move on to, I'd like to call upon Beatrice Ikoko, Environment Hamilton, to delegate respecting the process for the closure and sale of alleyways and potential of alleyways and public spaces and valuable green space infrastructure. So, Beatrice, are you here? Yeah, there you are. Welcome. So you also have 5 minutes for your presentation.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me. I'm just going to read off my phone here. So my presentation is entitled Rethinking Alleyways. So Environment Hamilton is encouraged by the City of Hamilton's declaration of a climate emergency and the acknowledgement of the vulnerability climate change puts us all in, excuse me, as communities and neighborhoods. So we continue to draw urgency to the need for better solutions to the environmental issues that we face. A changing climate means that our city will need to be more resilient. There are many pathways to resiliency, and green alleyways are one such way. Alleys can be vital players in the city's overall ecosystem. As the need for cities to rely on more sustainable approaches becomes increasingly urgent, revitalizing alleyways creates an opportunity to introduce green infrastructure. But also, as we have heard with beautiful alleys, It invites the surrounding neighborhood to collaborate on improvements and make use of the space. As well as we continue to intensify as a city, these neglected dead-end spaces will likely become more important as spaces of connectivity and even places of productivity. Cities around the world are rethinking their alleyways in this respect. Quoting from an article in City Lab already, in European cities like Paris, Rome, and Barcelona, beautiful alleys are vital pedestrian passageways. In Kyoto and Melbourne, they're retail hubs. The point is, alleys are green gold. They have endless potential, as we've heard from some of the speakers. That's why Environment Hamilton supports the goals and efforts of beautiful alleys to activating and enhancing alleyways as accessible public green spaces. We support citizens and citizens groups that ask the city to prioritize the preservation of public land, including our alleyways. In the minutes that remain, I would like to draw your attention to the Chicago Green Alleys program. A city with more alleyways than any other city in the world, Chicago has a unique network of infrastructure integrated into the city. So why is the city of Chicago interested in green alleys? Chicago recognizes the alleyway advantages as an opportunity to better manage and conserve resources and improve the environment. In their Green Alley Handbook, they ask us to imagine big. What if all the alleys in Chicago were green alleys? Up to 80% of the rainwater falling on these surfaces throughout the year would pass through permeable paving back into the earth, thereby reducing localized flooding by not sending additional water to the combined sewer system, recharging groundwater and saving taxpayer money that would otherwise be spent treating stormwater. They ask us to imagine if all the alleys had a light reflective surface, like a high albedo, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, that reflected heat energy, staying cool on hot days and thereby reducing the urban heat island effect, a condition where dense urban areas become several degrees warmer due to the density of buildings and the amount of heat absorbing paved areas. They urge us to think of the energy we conserve, the possibility of constructing alleys with recycled materials, thereby reducing the amount of construction and industrial waste hauled to landfills, and reducing the burden on natural resources. The City of Chicago recognizes through their Green Alley program, that alleys can improve not only the environment, but also the quality of life in neighborhoods. Why not take a leaf out of their handbook and begin to have these conversations that are already happening in other cities too? Even in Canada, example, Toronto Laneway Project, Montreal's Ruelle Verte, Green Alleyways, Vancouver's Laneway Project with BIAs, City of Calgary's back lane paving. So there are many projects around our country that are kind of looking at alleys in a different way to change the way people view these emerald pathways. Furthermore, at Environment Hamilton, we have been documenting the difference in air quality that alleys often offer pedestrians and cyclists as clean air routes compared to main roads. We've been noting the potential of alleyways to showcase pollinator gardens, visual art, and mural, as we've seen with Brenda's presentation, places for gardens to grow and children to play. We understand also that there's Councillor Nan and Councillor Farr have done some work with the community groups to kind of show support for their interest, almost done, in valuing and activating these community green spaces. As well, the City of Hamilton, we've heard also there's piloting laneway housing, and although there's a long way to go, there seems to be more reason to fast-track the alleyway management strategy. So in conclusion, with the previous delegates, Environment Hamilton really encourages in-depth consultations and thoughtful community conversations and engagement well in advance of alleyway closures and sales. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We do have some questions for you, so we'll start with Councillor Farr.
I was going to give Beatrice the opportunity to provide some local examples. She mentioned a number of cities across the world and here at home in Chicago and Vancouver and so forth, but you already did that in your presentation, and I'm glad you did. I know you're hyperactive in 2 and 3, the Safe Streets thing not long ago, which I was impressed by, and I appreciated your work there and your recent years with Environment Hamilton. So do you know about the Up Your Alley project, though, however?
Sorry, the what?
Up Your Alley project?
Up Your Alley. I've heard of it. Can you tell me a bit more?
That one was, I think, Carl kind of hit on some of the work International Village BIA and also
of course,
Downtown BIA have done. So do you know through you how many kilometers of laneways we have in the city?
I had that number, but I feel like maybe the next delegate will have that number. How many alleys? I know there's a lot, especially in Ward 3. There's the network. Somebody has it here, but.
So, and I had already referenced. I won't go long on this with the vice chair, but kind of at this point, I can't I wish it happened yesterday that we finally get the staff report, but with the number of laneways in the city, it's taken some time, what was initially asked for some years back with Councilor Marula. So I was happy to hear, and I'm sure you are, that we're going to be getting that this year, where we're looking at we're looking at it holistically. But up until that point, I think I need to continue to sort of assess each case as they come. So through you looked at, I'm sure, today's agenda. There were 2 examples of closures that have now been approved and likely will be ratified at council. Are you seeing any difference there with those 2 cases versus the Up Your Alley case?
I think that, you know, I really want to just bring that to your attention, that we need to kind of have that conversation before we sell off alleyways, but at the same time, where it makes sense, it makes sense. You know, if we have to kind of weigh what makes sense, but that's why we kind of need to have that strategy. We need to get it before making all these decisions. It really does make sense to fast track it so we can actually understand what we have, what the potential of these alleys are. So I've talked to some staff, and they've mentioned that they are looking at alleyway classifications and really working on that. And we're hoping to see I just heard that maybe they said summer or fall. So I think that would be very, very helpful to help us understand the potential we have.
Summer or fall. Great. Thank you, Beatrice. And certainly, you know, as the previous speaker had mentioned as well, as much as, you know, you see a public works agenda with a couple of closures on small pieces, L shapes, or servicing adjacent properties on the one case west side, not a huge surface, massive asphalt parking lot. On the other side, a number of residents who actually engaged and were part of the conversation. But the ultimate end goal is greater and higher use, obviously, and associated with the general hospital, which is ever growing. And the engagement resulted in taking care of the one primary issue from the 2 people that were part of that one report. The other's no different, just a smaller case over on Colburn. But just as we almost treated as a one-off in terms of closures, I think, as the previous speaker mentioned as well, it's important, I think, to highlight that we also are carefully considering laneways for greater and higher uses, as our LRT staff have done and identified. And so there's no concern between now and fall when the report comes, I don't think, that anything drastic is going to happen with respect to laneways that will serve, that are likely to serve greater and higher purposes, whether short-term or long-term. Would you not agree through you?
I think so, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I have no other speakers, so I need a motion to receive. Moved by Pearson, seconded by Vanderbeek. All in favor? That's carried. Just move on to 8.7, which is call upon Cameron Crosstach to delegate respecting the process for closure and sale of alleyways. Cameron, the floor is yours. I think you know the drill by now. You have 5 minutes.
Thanks for listening to my delegation today. I want to talk to you about strategy for retaining public land. That's how I see alleyways as public land. Primarily what brings me here today was the notice I received just by RSS feed, not in my mailbox, but about the closure of 2 alleyways, one on Wellington Street North and one at 21 Colburn Street. When I went to click on the link to look at this, the only document that was there was a map showing where the alleyway was located. It's the first thing I want to mention. I'll get to this later, but how we present these problems, right? So a map is great. It's nice to know where the alleyway is being closed, but as part of that public site, as part of when that information is released, having more information at that moment would be helpful. Also, you'll notice April 10th was 19 days ago. So the amount of time people have to consider this kind of thing. Also in the staff report, there was a paragraph that struck my attention. And what it said was, and it's something some folks have echoed here today, it said that the focus is on landowners and it focuses on who is negatively affected, right? So it makes kind of a statement about the people who are using this alley, who are nearby the alley, and that those folks are the ones who are negatively affected. That's the presumption I have here. And as another delegate said, people use the alleys to get through them. Some of them cycle through them, some of them walk through them. They're alternate green spaces. And so it's difficult to assess just by speaking to people who abut the land who is negatively affected. Also, this seems to have been going on as a discussion, the alleyway management strategy. The earliest discussion I could see about this, I think, was 2006 or 7. Then there was something in writing in 2008. It came up in 2011, and then eventually in 2017. So this has been a discussion that's been going on for a long time. Briefly, my perspective is that public land is public. The public has unrestrained access to that land, right? And the alleyways are public land. A lot of them are in an unassumed state, as you all know. Put the scare quotes up, right? Unassumed alleyways. They fall under this broader definition of public land. I thought it'd be useful to have a picture here to show you the alleyway network and what it kind of looks like. And you can see, especially in Ward 3 and farther east, it's quite an integrated network. There's quite a lot of alleyways, and it acts as primarily a secondary route for people to get around. I think seeing the map should make that really clear, right? As you go slightly west to Ward 2, you can see that just the layout of Ward 2, the way the downtown is structured, there aren't that many alleyways left. Very few left, comparatively. That's a closer shot of Ward 2. So you can see, especially in the central part of Ward 2, the ways to get around in the busiest part of our city. They don't exist. Those alleyways used to be there, but they're gone now. So that points to there being a lot of network fragility. That's what I'm calling it anyways. That the network here in Ward 2 is very fragile. There aren't a ton of places and ways to get around by alleyways anymore. And you can see the yellow up here, just to make that point. The yellow are those that are privately owned, and the bluish color are those that are publicly owned or unassumed alleyways owned by the city of Hamilton, right? As opposed to here you can see the blue alleyways in Wards 3, 4, this way. It's quite a lot more alleys by comparison. So I really want to emphasize and leave you a couple points, especially about who uses alleyways. It's not just landowners who use alleyways, right? I happen, as it turns out, to live on an alleyway. And so there's tons of people who use the alleyway. I live nearby all the time. And I think it's important to not privilege certain users of land, right? So landowners shouldn't have any more of a privileged voice in this discussion than the person who uses that alley on a regular basis to walk through it. That's my focus here, is on an equality, right? So not having said, well, I live right beside it, so I have more of a voice than somebody who might use the alleyway every day. I'd argue that those negatively affected include a broad cross-section of residents. I also think that our engagement strategy needs to be broader. I know that's part of the alleyway management strategy. Glad to hear that it's coming forward in the fall. But that notices need to be sent out to a wider group. So I'm asking that these things be prioritized. I'm glad that number 1 is already off my list, that there will be a timely completion of the alleyway management strategy. But I still think we have to focus on going beyond the minimum in the law. So the law says, we only have to notify certain people within an arm's throw. We only have to notify those people who abut the land. But I think we have to have a holistic approach to who uses land, what is public land for, and focus on that. Thanks.
Thank you, Cameron. We have one speaker, so just hold on for a question. Councillor Whitehead.
Thanks, Cam. And you raise an interesting issue. We have a lot of pedestrian pathways as well that cut through neighborhoods. And I had an issue where the drug needles and everything you hear that neighbors don't want on a particular pathway that was an older design. So we attempt to close that pathway based on the quality of life. It was, the fence being put on fire, the whole bit. So there's a lot of drastic things happening on this particular pathway. But I took the same approach. That wasn't just their pathway. It was actually a cutway into a neighborhood, into a school system. So we had a broader consultation and did have the neighbors fill out a survey, and 80% of the survey came back and said, keep the pathway open. I think what you're suggesting is where there's demonstrated, I want to make it clear because we can't assume that there's a demonstrated public interest in every alleyway within the city. But where there is a demonstrated public interest beyond the immediate neighbors, that there should be broader consultation. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, I mean, I really appreciate the delegation from earlier because that provides context about why someone wants to close an alley, right? So if there's a blind alley or a little piece of an alley or these kinds of things. You're right. I think it matters to ensure that there are people using the alley to have that broader consultation. But you bring up an interesting point too when you're talking about why we're closing alleys and when alleys become unsafe or when alleys become undesirable to remain open. And so I think the city has an opportunity here, as I think Beatrice mentioned, right? Like other cities are taking on, to preserve this space as safe public space, to not leave these in an unassumed state, which I think is an interesting way of thinking about it, but to assume the alleyways, right? Under a public strategy, a management strategy which is being developed, to identify for ourselves where are these vital networks. I mean, I think this picture just really speaks strongly to that. Look, it's just quite compelling what the secondary network looks like here, right? So where for us are there strategies to preserve that network? And where should the city assume that land, take care of it, and make sure that it's a public asset and a public good? So that's my point.
Hopefully the master plan that comes back will capture a lot of that. Thank you.
Okay, I have no other speakers. Oh, I do now. Esther Paul, sorry.
Thank you. Through the chair, I think this is for the staff. I was wondering how many alleyways are there on the mountain, especially in Ward 7? Or did we close a lot on Ward 7? I don't know. And I was wondering through the staff if we could get a percentage, how many are on the mountain? We seem to talk about 1, 2, and 3 all the time. I would love to know about where I live on Ward 7.
Ward?
Or the mountain.
So through the chair, Councillor, we have a map that we've created of all of the alleys, both assumed and unassumed. And what we'll do is we'll go back and pull out that data and send it over to you.
Yeah, that would be great. So we
Great if that come back for the whole city, just in that report that it was bringing forward.
Yeah, the map I have here, I can't move around it. It's just a picture of the map. Otherwise, I'd show you. There are about 700 alleyways in Hamilton, I think. That's the number I know about. Not sure how many in Ward 7, but there's a lot.
Yeah, but I'm just wondering if any on the mountain, especially Ward 7, were they closed or, because that would be interesting to know what's going on throughout the city, not just 1, 2, and 3. So, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Nan.
Through the chair, this is, it's through the delegations that I'm thinking about this question. It is a question for staff who are bringing forward the alleyway management strategy report. Whether or not that report also includes an assessment of current green space in each of the areas where we have our alleyways, just given some of the comments that have been brought forward by delegates about the potential health impact as we consider what our alleyway management strategy would look like. So is there any staff who could just respond yes or no, or whether or not that can be integrated in?
Ward or Edward, who wants to take it?
Thank you. Through the chair, to the councillor, through the strategy itself, we're looking at the function of those alleyways. Some are assumed, some are unassumed. We're looking at, are they, there for mobility needs? Are they connectors to the various communities? What their function currently is? A lot of them are actually closed off as well, which has turned into green space. So we are looking at the overall function. But I think what we need to do is come back to the council with a strategy about what are the main criteria for keeping them getting rid of them from the city ownership. And then what we need to do is develop the end state. What is the objective for that alleyway in the longer term?
Councillor Nan?
Thank you.
Okay, and Councillor Pearson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I just want to ask, there was a comment made about the mapping and sending it to Councillor Pauls. I'd like to ask that it be sent to all of us, so we all have that information for the next meetings going forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I see no more speakers, so motion to receive. Moved by Councillor Farr, second by Councillor Pauls. All in favor? That's carried. Let's move on now to discussion items, because there is no staff reports. Amendment to the Solid Waste Management Plan. Is there any discussion regarding 10.1? Moved by Councillor Pearson, seconded by Councillor Vanderbeek. Just a quick question. I guess I'll start with you, Craig. You're saying it's a temporary ban on grass. Are we going to make it permanent sometime, or is it to wait and see after we try a summer without having grass clippings in our composting facility?
Mr. Chair, the plan is to do it as a temporary ban until we can evaluate the effectiveness of taking it out of the system. When we upgrade our technology, seeing what that technology is capable of handling, and then evaluating that, and then evaluating leaf and yard versus grass. So there's multiple pieces to this. Grass is very high in ammonia, and that is one of the things that impacted the facility the most. So there is a possibility that we could recommend that leaf and yard be reintroduced once our tonnage capacity increases and our technology is in place. But we could be coming back with saying that grass is permanent.
Okay, because the public always gets frustrated when we change waste for some reason. When you go one direction, then you turn around and go a different direction. So how long do you think the temporary ban will be or before you come back with the report and whether it becomes permanent or the ban gets withdrawn?
Mr. Chair, we're probably looking at least another year, perhaps another year and a half.
Oh, so it's quite a while then.
Yes.
This be the full grass cutting season this year at least.
That's correct, and possibly next year as well.
Okay. Okay, so it's been, I don't see any other, there is some requests. Councillor Pearson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate you raising that point. And I did chat with staff. Certainly as Chair of Solid Waste Management, I've always raised over the years of changing things as we move forward all the time on our programs. And I know that, and I will say, I haven't had a whole lot of concerns raised with regards to the elimination of the leaf and yard and grass clippings out of our green carts at this time. I've actually had residents, once you explain it to them, they understand and they know that it is being recycled somewhere else. It's going to be windrowed at the Glanbrook landfill as opposed to being through our compost facility. They're accepting of that. So I just want to be cautious that going forward, and certainly look forward to what comes down the way in another year or two. But I think we have to embrace the fact that these are materials that we are recycling. We are processing. It's just in a different form. So I want to thank staff and just being cautious going forward. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Nan.
Thank you. Through the chair, it's just similar to the last point made by Councillor Pearson. Just wanted to make sure that there's public clarity about what the city is recommending our residents do with their yard, leaf, and grass. So my understanding with the report is that we are requesting all of our residents put them in brown bags for collection at the curb, correct, through staff? Through the chair to the staff?
Through the chair, that is correct. But you can put it in either a brown bag, a dedicated open-top waste container with the green triangle sticker that we mailed up to all residences, or into a bushel basket.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, I have no more speakers then, so it's been duly moved and second. All in favor, needs an electronic vote. Okay, that carries. And we'll move on then to 10.2, which is our drinking water quality management system operational plan summary. Is there any questions on this report? Moved by Councillor Whitehead, seconded by Councillor Nan. Seeing no discussion, just want to thank staff for this report. I know it's very important we stay on top of safe, clean drinking waters. All in favor? That carries. So we'll move on now to motions, and there's a revised motion from Councillor Farr regarding the bees. And so, Councillor Farr, do you want to place your motion, your revised motion?
Yes, I'm glad you thanked staff on the previous item too. I just had 2 big gulps of water last night, and I went after, when you have a nice refreshing drink of water. And I thought about all the great work our staff do, and from an operational perspective, even greater today. This motion, Mr. Chair, is edited to appease your frugalness, and I appreciate in agenda review.
The birds and the bees here, are you?
I appreciate in agenda review you had some concerns there, and I have no problem with the edit to wait a little while longer. I'm very confident staff are going to come back to see that there is to be no cost. A big thanks to Councillor Marula for all his work on the pollinators in the past, and I appreciate his support on this motion here today. And a special thank you to Jen Baker at the Naturalist Club who brought this forward, looking for our bee city designation on a national scale, which I'm confident in a short order we'll get, because we won't see too much cost attached to this, if any. Thank you.
Well, you may want to read out just the therefore be resolved, because it is revised for those at home.
Absolutely. Thank you. You don't want me to read the whereases?
No, I don't think it's necessary.
Therefore, be it resolved that staff be directed to report back to the Public Works Committee on actions and potential costs required to meet the designation standards of a bee city by Bee City Canada, and that is seconded by Councillor Marula. Thanks.
Okay, moved by Councillor Farr, seconded by Councillor Marula. I see no request to speak, so all in favor, electronic vote. And that carries. Are there any notices of motion? Go ahead.
I don't know if it's Public Works or maybe perhaps a different committee. I'm getting a lot of complaints from neighbors with the stacking of wood, like by the courts. Stack them high and leaning against a fence and causing, well, in fact, I got a picture where it's actually so high it's falling into the next neighbor's yard. Do we have any bylaws on wood piling and distance from fence line?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that feels like property standards, but I'm happy to follow up and get back to you if you like.
I guess it would be public health, because I know some cities are actually banning the burning of wood within the urban boundaries. So I'll deal with public health on that as well. Thank you.
Yeah, it's probably appropriate to go to planning, because bylaw, it reports up through planning. Okay, so I see no notice of motion. Let's move into then, I move and seconder to approve the amendments to the outstanding business list. Moved by Whitehead, seconded by Pearson. All in favor? And that's electronic vote. And that carries. So may I have a mover and a seconder to move into closed session respecting items 14.1 and 14.2 pursuant to section 8.1 subsections F and K of the city's procedural bylaw 18270 and section 239.2 subsection F and K of the Ontario Municipal Act 2001 as amended, as the subject matter pertains to the receiving of advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose, and the position, plan, procedure, criteria, or instructions to be applied to any negotiations carried out on or to be carried out by or on behalf of the city. So mover to move in, moved by Collins, seconded by Marula. All in favor, we need electronic vote. And that carries. So could I now ask the public and any staff who are not required to be in the closed session meetings, please exit the chambers, taking all of your personal belongings with you. Members of the public will be invited to return to hear any further deliberations upon committee reconvening in open session, indicated by the removal of the frosting on the windows and the elimination of the white noise. Committee will, in the event that they are in closed session for more than 30 minutes, wait up to 5 minutes upon reconvening in open public before proceeding with the meeting to provide members of the public and the media time to return to the meeting room. Madam Clerk.
Mr. Chair, if we could do a revote moving into closed session. There was a vote in error.
You want us to redo the vote then to go into closed session? Okay, all in favor? And that now carries. Madam Clerk, we have to wait 5 minutes.
Through you, Mr. Chair, up to 5 minutes.
You please give me instructions when it's okay to go ahead so I don't get in trouble. Item 14.1, standardization of enterprise asset management systems. And so we need an electronic vote on that. The contents of the report and recommendations A, B, and C remain, and D remain confidential. So electronic vote on that, please. And that carries 10 to nothing. And a 14.2, this is the Sobe bike share contract negotiations. And can I please have a mover and a second to approve the following? That the report respecting Sobe bike share contract negotiations update and amendment remain confidential. You need electronic vote. A mover and a seconder. Moved by Pearson, seconded by Danko. All in favor? So that carries 9 to 1. A to D on the first report. E, we said that is what was moved. Okay, seconded by Councillor Whitehead. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you.